I can say a lot of things about where podcasting has taken me, but few would compare to being in the presence of Aaron Ra riding a tiny hobby horse in the basement of a church during an atheist convention after telling us a story about listening to Motorhead and cooking vindaloo. Not sure there's an actual Patreon pitch in here, but like that's a story that happened, and I'm not exaggerating it even a little bit. So I want to thank Justin, Verilane, Bridget, and Petrie for becoming our newest patrons and helping this whole thing happen. This week's discussion is a fun one. I know a lot of us can use that at the moment, so I hope you enjoy it. Heart emoji. Yeah, I totally typed a heart emoji in my script for this because that's who I am as a person. Anyways. Your source for news, commentary, discussion, and debate at the intersection of the atheist movement and the LGBT rights movement. This is the Atheist Manifesto. Hello, dear friends, and welcome to the Atheist Manifesto. I am your host, Callie Wright, joined once more by my fantabulous co-host, Ari Stillman. What's up, Ari?
Ugh, these guys. I don't know what we're gonna do with these guys.
Did you just assume their genders?
I did.
I feel like of all people who are gonna not do that, Ari, you would be the person to not do that.
But I'm a bad boy. That's how I identify right now, as a very bad boy. Very naughty.
Bad boy is your gender identity.
Yeah. That song is about me. The one about the bad boys.
Gosh, this is going to be great. I'm super excited about this. So we took last week off because I just needed a break, and life has been interesting. So I figured we'd do a fun interview this week. Went to DC for Awesome Con and ran into an organization called Geeks Out, and I will let them explain themselves. But like from the name, I'm guessing that anyone who listens to the show understands why that's a thing I'm excited about. So we have Tom and Ben from Geeks Out. Welcome to the show, friends.
Hey, thanks for having us. Pleasure to be here.
So why don't you just sort of introduce yourselves, tell us what you're about and what you do.
Cool. So, hey, my name's Tom Lotito. I'm the president of the Washington, D.C. chapter of Geeks Out. And so we're a nonprofit that's all about rallying, empowering, and promoting queer geeks.
Hi, I'm Ben Fury. I'm a clinger-on that never went away.
The Ari Stillman story.
That's the best bio ever written. I just want to throw that out there.
Thank you. It's also on my LinkedIn. Add me to your social professional network. No, this year I got a title, coordinator. But I've been working with Geeks Out maybe a little bit after Tom started with it, and I've been helping out and assuming more responsibilities as time goes on, as the powers that be trust that I won't screw it up.
Yeah. He's a good one. Yay.
That's legit. So, I mean, is there a story behind Geeks Out? Like, is there a thing that was like, there was like this epiphany where it's like, oh my gosh, we need to do this? Or is it literally just like, hey, we're geeks and we're queer and we think both of those things are awesome, so let's do the thing? Like, how did that work out? That
depends. Do you have access to a Foley artist?
Oh, me.
Yeah.
Okay, it was a dark and stormy night. Nice. All right, now that we set the scene, Tom can be serious.
So yeah, no, it began in the city that never sleeps, which is, I think, New York City. So yeah, there are.
I think.
So Joey Stern and Josh Siegel, who are friends, and they're both nerds who go to conventions and things like this, and they were thinking like, oh, what if like we just started, doing like queer nerd events, and I think like Josh said it as a joke, and then Joey's like, okay, well, we're doing it now. And then they started having little social get-togethers, and it grew from this into like in 2010, it became an official organization, and there's like a board of people, and now we're a 501c3 nonprofit. But basically the idea was like, there have always been queer nerds, not just in like, the comics world, but in like video games and like movies and really anything you can be nerdy about. But I think a lot of us have had this experience where you go to a convention or you go to, in the old days, talk on a message board or, God forbid, Reddit. And it's just like,
right.
It's not necessarily a fun time to be like, hey, let's talk about queer characters, or maybe they'll hire queer people to do a thing. But now you built a community where people can talk about that stuff, they can hang out and be friends. And now we're in a bunch of cities all over the country. We work with conventions, and it's just grown like crazy 8 years later.
I remember being 12 years old and not being able to fully realize my my Super Saiyan 18 character on Yahoo Chat roleplay.
Right.
Those are words.
7 or something.
Yeah, I role played as all the Sailor Scouts until because I was not going to be tuxedo masked, but it was a good time.
Yeah, I think the genesis of this group really it feels kind of like when somebody goes, "Hey, I bet you can't jump from there and not get hurt," or "Hey, wouldn't it be funny if you ate that entire blank of blank and then you do it?" And then that's when it was like, "Hey, I bet you can't start a national 501c3 nonprofit that hopes, empowers, and promotes queer geek community." Those kind of things that kids do.
Yeah, every day. I meet people every day.
And then somebody says, "Hey, Ari, I bet you can't achieve happiness and fulfillment." And then I'm like, "Yeah, now I can do it because you told me not to."
Yay.
Yeah.
So
exactly.
that's the key. All right.
Yeah, we're running entirely by spite.
Yeah.
Listen, though, I feel like that's not an invalid way to live at this point. And sometimes that's where you got to go. And so I'm always interested in these things because it's like, there's the part of me that's activist and I want to change the world and I want to make life miserable for powerful people who don't like me. And then sometimes it's like, you know what? I really like Star Trek and I want to get drunk and have a heated debate over whether or not Jadzia Dax counts as a queer character because of the symbiont that's in her belly and all the weird philosophy behind that. And so that was part of the reason that I went to AwesomeCon is I hooked up with this guy Dan, who I've talked about on the show, who does Gays in Space, and his thing is literally hey, I'm stoked that there's gay people in Star Trek now, so I guess I'm gonna throw a party, and everybody had a lot of fun, so I guess this is what I do now. And so and so, do you guys see what you do as activism? Is it a social thing? Is it both?
Yeah, my general philosophy is am I being political? Well, of course, because my very being is political. Now, we're clearly a nonprofit, so we're apolitical, but, just we exist and we're out, and that's a very brave act. One of the using Star Trek as a reference, I love Star Trek. I've been watching Star Trek my whole life, but at some time when I was a teenager, I'm like, there are no gay people in space or in the future. Yeah. What, did they find a cure? What? It's kind of sick.
Yeah, and people actually said that. It's gross.
Yeah. But yeah, no, Geeks Out has been really great because I think it's a great channel for that. And, I think celebrating all these, queer communities and organizations is good because we can really help each other. Mm-hmm. The Geeks Out is the only one that I know of that we have capes.
Oh, that's important.
Yeah, for volunteers. So we have this
work uniform.
Pretty much, yes.
Well, I've
just in life.
Okay, so you never know what kind of party you're going to end up. So I have both a Batman and a Superman cape in my trunk, but.
Were you a Boy Scout? Be prepared.
For about 6 months. I learned how to use a knife. Unfortunately, it's problematic that I was really good at rifling. It was Missouri.
Fair.
And I've changed a lot since I was 10. And the wow, yeah, 10-year-olds with guns, weird. But then it wasn't my crowd. But I had a lot of fun. I think there was a boating situation when I was 19. I was really glad to have talked to people who knew how to use boats before.
And so, are these just social events? Do you guys, and obviously you set up booths at con because that's where I met you. But yeah. Do you do social events, fundraising for stuff? What is the actual, the actual purpose of the group? What do you do?
So since it's about like rallying and empowering queer folks, part of it is we do in cities all over the country. We have more like social event related things, like community events. So we've got those in New York where it all started, then in DC where Ben and I are, as well as Chicago, LA. Things are starting up in Philadelphia and hopefully Seattle soon. It's basically so we do like once a month, we'll do a happy hour at this bar called the Black Cat, or we'll do a queer book club thing at this place, Phantom Comics.
We try to rally around whatever movie's coming out.
Yeah, exactly. We're all getting ready to see Infinity War, and we all saw what's it called, Wrinkle in Time recently. But I think it's there's other things we do that are more like focused on like kind of half of it is like let's just get together and hang out, and then half of it is let's accomplish something. So part of it is like now we're partnered with the Penny Arcade Expos and help run their diversity lounges. We used Kickstarter and we set up this like Serving Pride queer history book. So it's something where it's kind of like a Seder, but like over dinner, you go through and talk with folks at your table around like queer history and stories that aren't always told. Mm-hmm. So it's part of it's like getting stories out about queer people of color and so on that, you know, I never got in my history books growing up, but it also gives, you know, LGBTQ people a chance to kind of talk about and pass things on. Cause like, you know, not in my family, like, you know, it's not like my mom and dad are gay, so they didn't know gay history. Like I didn't get that cultural pass down. So we also do stuff that helps kind of make that happen. Yeah,
there's no formalized way of teaching queer history. So people that started the Serving Pride project, it is based on like the Seder. So you get a bunch of people together, you read from a book, you have foods that go with the story, and it's shipping now.
Yeah, that's
right. Yeah. We bought them maybe like a year and a half ago, but we're very excited. So it's gonna hit like right at the right time for Pride. Mm-hmm. So I can imagine all the people that supported the Kickstarter now get to do host their own little like Pride dinners.
Yeah, it's cool.
Man, that's freaking cool. I'm really into that. And so I'm curious what a lot of the reaction has been like, because I feel like there's when you insert queerness or transness into a thing, like I feel like that's a thing people are either like really super excited about, or they're like, oh my God, I want you to die. Like, and I don't feel like there's a lot of like, I guess that's a thing.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know. I think we've been pretty fortunate in that, I don't know, we're all kind of loud. So like people who don't, I don't know. I think we're fine with putting ourselves out there. But I think really every convention that I've ever worked with has wanted us to be there, or has wanted to make their like convention more inclusive.
They can't get enough of us. Don't you understand? We're amazing.
Right.
I mean, I would agree thus far.
It's not like, you know, because when we're like tabling at an event or something like that, like I've never had anyone come up and be like, oh, I can't believe you people are here. You're, you know, ruining my comic books and you're making Supergirl wear more of a shirt or something. I don't know.
Yeah.
It's just like, I think,
and a lot of people like gravitate to it. Like our strong female character shirts.
Yeah.
Like that crosses what do we call that? Communities. There are no boundaries though. Everyone loves that one.
Yeah. I think it's just something where, I don't know, the feeling I get is like people are so overall like, I guess desperate's not the nicest way to put it, but it's something where like, you know, if you're at a normal convention floor, you kind of see the same things everywhere. Like you see like all the little Lego people and all the Funko Pops, but there's not. And then when you see something that's like, oh, here's a whole section of like queer artists, that's like, you know, there's like something that's more, in a way, it's like more authentic. It's like,
well, and it shows that you matter, and that goes into representation. Yeah. You know, when like you can go about representation or acceptance in like what I consider to be the wrong way, which is like, oh, it doesn't matter, so therefore you have no identity. Mm-hmm. Or you can say, hey, no, you have an identity and you're welcome to participate in this safe space and not have to code shift or worry about people, you know, trashing you or telling you that somebody's not a girl or somebody's not a boy, you know, like none of that goes on. This is representation, and it's formally validated by the whatever power runs this convention. And that's important. It's like an anchor point.
Yeah, that's super important, because I do a lot of conventions in the atheist community, and like those conventions are obviously very different because they're not as big. I mean, a big atheist convention has like 800 people there. It's more of a niche community, and there's talk among sort of us like token like minority groups about how like we've got our trans for this con, or like we've got our black person for this con, like et cetera, you know, and obviously part of that's a matter of scale, right? Like there's at least when I started doing this, there weren't a lot of people available to do it. So it was almost like you didn't really have a choice but to tokenize, because it's like you're one of two people having this conversation and you happen to be the only one available this weekend. So like it's not so I don't mean to say that like it's a bad thing or that people are malicious in doing bad things, but like it's a combination of a lack of scale and sort of the idea of like, oh, we've got this one person to represent this one viewpoint. But when I was at AwesomeCon, again, the scale is huge because there's thousands and thousands of people there, and they had Pride Alley, and I'm walking through and I'm like, this place is for me. And the thing that I always worry about as a trans woman is like, okay, so this is an explicitly queer space. That doesn't mean it's a trans inclusive space, right? And so I stop at this booth that makes these cloth menstrual pads, and without me prompting by saying like trans activism is my thing, this woman at the table is talking about like, oh yeah, these are awesome for trans guys who still have periods too, and here's why. And I was like, oh my God, we're being thought of here, you know. And like it sucks that the bar is that low, but like it was a very explicit sign to me that like, oh okay, like we are factoring in and not just as an afterthought. And I'm seeing all of this art with people who sort of like fit like a queer look, and I'm seeing like women kissing each other and men kissing each other and androgynous looking people and this whole thing. And so like when I got involved in the atheist movement, I had very rose-colored glasses about the whole thing. You're like, oh, like these are my people. And then the deeper you get in, the more you realize like, well, they're just people, right? People have problems no matter what community you're in. And I don't think the atheist community's problems are uniquely bad. I think it's just as bad as anywhere else in society. But like the limited exposure I've had, like I'm almost like starting to feel that way about the nerd community. And there's like these alarm bells going off that are like, no, you've been through this process before.
You will be betrayed.
And so I'm wondering about your all's experiences in that way.
Yeah, well, I think from the convention perspective, because it's something where AwesomeCon in particular, I want to give them a shout out. They've been really good about broadening like what their queer representation looks like, because it's something where instead of it just being like, come to the Geeks Out booth, but we set up this thing called Pride Alley, where it's literally a whole section of the convention floor, like half of a row are all LGBTQ like owned or targeted, vendors that showed up there.
I think it was a lot bigger this year, honestly.
Yeah,
there were definitely more booths.
Yeah, and then part of that was also setting up that one of the rooms where they were doing like presentations and things like that.
A panel room.
Panel
room.
Whatever they're called. The point is there was one of them that had
yeah, there was one of those things.
Right, one of those rooms where people.
They're chairs. Okay, sounds like.
Here's a projector. Yeah. But there was one. It was the same one through the whole con was holding queer-related like panels. So that way, you didn't have to necessarily like search through your guidebook to find the two panels on page 1 and page 30 or whatever it is. You can just be like, all right, I can go to this space and I'll be safe.
You can hang out there all day.
Right. But I think one thing, like what you're talking about with the conventions you're at, like it's easy to kind of fall into the, okay, well, we know this person is good. They're going to be helpful. They know how to talk in front of a room. But it's something where if they really want to make their convention more inclusive, you have to take that next step and realize like, if you have like multiple trans people like talking on a panel, believe it or not, like they'll have different experiences. Like we all
weird.
But, a lot of times,
crazy.
Like,
All fake
folks,
news. We're all the same,
right? Yeah, but it's like, I don't know, trying to hit it from that angle has been helpful, but it's something where I just think spending the time out front and like very bluntly saying, like I've seen conventions say, like we're looking particularly for speakers who are people of color, who have disabilities, who identify as one thing or another.
And plural, like
right.
That's like people are so blown away when they realize that you're not a monolith and like of opinion. Like there's more than one. I mean, you want to hear opinions, two different opinions from two different like gay people. Block a pride parade. for 20 minutes. That'll start some. Can we curse on this podcast?
Yeah, absolutely.
That'll start some shit.
It sure will.
Well, yeah, and I think that's so valuable too, because I was thinking, like, obviously we eventually want to end up in a world where that's not a thing. And so I'm thinking to myself, you know, in this space that's ostensibly supposed to be closer to that ideal. But then, so I was on one of those panels in the room, the Gaze in Space panel that I was there with my friend Dan, and we were talking about LGBT stuff and Star Trek, or lack thereof, right? And you know, Dan has done a bunch of these parties, but like it was the first time that there was a thing like this outside of an explicitly like Star Trek convention, or the second time. And there was like, if I remember, there were like 70 or 80, maybe even like 100 people in the room. And, you know, as much as I want to think like, oh, you know, it's Dan and I and it's the organization, like I really think that it was because it was explicitly like, there are people who are interested in LGBTQ stuff. This is the place to go for that. So like by default, I'm probably just going to be a little more interested in what's going on in this room. So I think it's a great way to get people just headed in that direction.
Yeah. And I think one thing I noticed this year with our stuff at AwesomeCon more than other conventions of previous years is we were having a lot more like kids coming up.
Yeah.
Like we're talking like tweens or even younger. And it was just...
and even with their families.
Yeah. It's like there were some kids who were like saying, you know, oh, if my parents see me take a pronoun sticker, they're going to kill me. But, you know, but a lot of people also came with like their moms. And it was like, there was a mom who was like, oh yeah, you know, my son just told me he's transgender, so I want to, you know, get him a sticker that says my pronouns are he and his and show my support that way. And that was like, I think, you know, that's not something people would necessarily, I don't know. If I were like a young queer person, again, like I was so many years ago, I would not expect to like see that kind of support at like, you know, a nerdy convention or an anime con or what have you.
Well, and to be honest,
always there, you know, there's a lot of us.
I think in that for us as volunteers, like, I know for me, it's a learning experience because I think last year I was so blown away by the number of, you know, I'm a cisgendered person, but I was blown away by the number of trans people who were like, can we get something like these pronoun stickers, but like, you know, for work, for like permanent that I can put on my badge. And I'm just thinking, how do they not know at work, or how do they keep messing up? And if it happens every day, and it's just like, I get clued into things that I walk around with blinders too. And, you know, I that's one of the things that I really like about working with this organization is you never stop learning and growing yourself.
Yeah, and that was one of my favorite things is you know, there's the pronoun stickers, and it wasn't just he, him, and she, her. There was they, them, which was awesome. And then
or ask me.
Yeah. And I remember seeing at the Gaze in Space booth, and I remember probably 3 or 4 people who looked, just by looking, I would have guessed maybe 10, 12 years old with they, them pins, or like she, her pins. And I'm just like, oh my God, like this is maybe a little slice of the world we're trying to create in this room. Like I encountered a lot of things that have made me a lot more cynical than I used to be, you know, since I started doing activism and stuff like that. And, you know, seeing stuff like that, it makes me think like maybe we are doing a thing here. Because I think for me, the whole like existing in like a nerdy space thing at a convention, or even like just like in a group of people like getting together to watch the Star Trek Discovery premiere, for me it's like my queerness and my community around that is one thing, and the nerdy stuff that I'm into is something that's completely separate from that. And but then I think about like so many of my formative experiences growing up have those things intertwined. Like Star Trek helped me figure out who I was and made me feel good about who I was. So like it just makes sense for that stuff to go together. And I think even going in, I was like I'm literally going to a con to talk about gay shit and Star Trek. Like, so there are so few ways that goes bad for me, right? But but like I think even I was a little surprised at how good that felt and how right it felt. That's like it felt more of like an acknowledgement and more of like inhabiting my whole self. And at the end of the day, that's what this is all supposed to be about, right?
Yeah, exactly. And I think it's something where I don't know, for me at least, like whether it's things like coming out at work or just like, I've had similar experiences in like nerdy spaces too. Like until you feel like you can be your full self comfortably, like you don't always realize how tense your shoulders were, or like what that weight actually felt like.
Mm-hmm.
And then it's something where it's like, well, then when I get a taste of it, I was like, well, I'm never going back. I mean, to hell with that, So, but that's part of why one of the things we started doing was hosting like our own convention. It's called FlameCon. It's like the biggest queer Comic-Con in the world, and we're doing our 4th one this year. And we're moving into Times Square in New York, which is nuts and super exciting.
Out of the boroughs and into Midtown,
right? Yeah, but it's something where it's like, so it's a Saturday and Sunday. It's like the 18th and 19th of August. But on the 19th, we have it free for everyone who's 18 or younger.
That was really beautifully layered in.
Oh, that's incredible. I love that.
On purpose. But yeah, but it's something where like, having that many like high school students from like New York and all around there like swarm in, it's really, it's just nice to see that. And I don't know, I think it's also helpful. I guess this is more from the cynical side of things, but because we have like folks from, like the, Marvel and DC and those, like, when you think of comics, I think of these people in capes. Like, a lot of times online, or I guess in the community, there's this thought of like, the comic book fan is like the comic book guy from The Simpsons. But when you're seeing, if you build a space where people's entire selves can be recognized and accepted and they can actually express themselves, like they will come here, they will, buy your stuff. They'll want to write their own stories too and be their own creators. And I don't know, just being able to build that, I think I think it's really important. And I'm just glad to see that, people are showing up, from, offline and being able to meet people in person, and, you don't feel alone. I think that's really important.
Hands down, the best cosplay I've ever seen at FlameCon.
Which was,
I thought you were about to give an example.
that's good. There's
what's that dating game that Daddy?
Oh, Dream Daddy.
Dream Daddy. There were so many Dream Daddy cosplayers. It was unbelievable.
Yeah.
Groups of people.
Yeah. It's that, and it's every Steven Universe gem you could ever want to see.
So many gems.
It's so good. But
oh yeah, there was some great Steven Universe. Actually, the Bleed Geek booth, the booth that had the cloth menstrual pads, one of the ladies that was running that had just the most amazing cosplay for oh my God, Steven's mom. Her name is escaping me.
Yeah,
Rose, yeah, big white dress and the big hair. Oh,
yeah, they actually I see them at a lot of cons in the area, and they're wonderful. The Be More Comfy.
Yeah,
I think it's their business. Yeah, they are the cutest group of people, and they have a little boy that was running around as one of the Voltron.
Yeah,
and it was just
that's awesome.
Just, it made all my like want to be a parent squishy bits go like. Ah!
Yes.
That doesn't sound good.
Yeah, just for cosplay purposes, that's definitely.
Yes, I just want to have a kid for cosplay.
Dressed up in cosplay 24/7. We'll have multiples of the costumes so that I can change them out and wash them.
There you go.
Actually, I teach them to wash them themselves. They need to be self-sufficient at an early age.
Now you're thinking ahead.
Well, I just know me.
Yeah.
Have you guys found yourself having like super deep conversations with people? Because like I find that it's kind of difficult to do that at cons, because I'm like, I mean, if I'm just going as an attendee, it's not that big of a deal. But like most of the time I've gone to cons like that, it's when I'm working a booth, and because I used to work for a nonprofit, this support community for sexual violence survivors, and we would go to cons like that. And so like obviously, these are topics that are, huge, and somebody comes up and they're like, oh my gosh, I want to tell you my life story. And then you're like, I'm working, but like, I want to hear your life story. Like, do you guys get a lot of that?
I mean, I think there's some people who are chatty, but I think the ones who come with that, like, I feel like it's mostly parents or even grandparents who are like, hey, like my child is coming out. Like, I think I'm doing this right. What did you do? What would work for you? And, I always talk with them and give them resources, but so we also try to have a bunch of folks at the table.
Yeah.
Right.
We're there to work. Yeah. No, and I think I've heard most of those conversations happen around the panel rooms or things like that. Like, or they catch us later when we're walking around being our own version of a tourist and recognize the t-shirt. But I mean, that's one of the things is it's like, hey, here's my card. Talk to me offline. Well, this sounds like a great story. Come to my event. Because it's really creating those spaces where you can have those conversations. Right in the middle of the con floor is not the most comfortable or private. Yeah. So, but typically, like maybe when we're hanging out at a restaurant or something as an event, like there you go. That's where people really open up.
Yeah. I think it's something where, like, I don't know, if you give people, like, it's the same sort of thing where I sound like a broken record, but if you give people like a space where they can talk and be heard, they're going to do that. And I don't know, I think that's how, like, that's, part of the mission is like building those communities. And I think that's how it happens. Well, and we support, I don't know, I feel like Geeks Out, a lot of the leadership and membership are creators themselves. And, it's kind of a not self-fostering, but like it's something that supports ourselves. Like we create the space which allows us to create more space. Yeah, it's something where, it's like you're carving out your own little, area where it's something where, you don't have to go to like the queer Comic-Con, but you can. And it's something. And you should. Exactly.
Yeah, you totally should. Yeah. There will be links in the show notes.
Right. Yeah. Thanks. But it's also like if you want to go to just, Penny Arcade or C2E2 or whatever, it's something where you can go to the mainstream con, and it's not like you're going to have a bad time there. Like you should be able to do both and have a great time at both.
Yeah.
That's the thing. Cause like a lot of times I know like when Penny Arcade started doing their diversity lens, people were like, well, okay, if you have to have like a separate area for the quote unquote diverse people, like, is that sending the best message, But a lot of times, when they started doing that, people were like, well, it's kind of nice to have a space where I'm off of like this giant con floor and I can just chat with folks. Yeah. So it's just, it's been interesting to see like different conventions try different, ways of making themselves more inclusive. And it seems like so long as they're willing to take feedback from people, and pretty much every con I've worked with has always done that. I don't know, they keep getting better at it every year. So I think that's been neat.
I'm noticing that there is a specific group of people who might be a little bit left out. And I just, in the interest of, inclusion, I want to bring this up. Correct me if I'm wrong, but it seems like you don't have a lot of stuff for straight people. So like, do you have like, use normal pronouns stickers or like straight stuff in Star Wars panels, anything like that, so people don't feel left out and get their feelings hurt?
I mean, I don't care what people do in their own bedroom.
It's like, I just hear about it. If it gets rubbed in my face, I'm just going to be unhappy. But I mean, a lot of the trans people on our board are straight, so there's their representation. They're covered.
You've got your token straight.
Good answer.
Very nice.
Yeah, but no, it's but no, we welcome straight people to our events. It's totally cool. Cisgender people are welcome too, I guess. But it's something where it's like I'm not happy about it. No, we're happy about it.
We're both
minor details. But yeah.
Oh, they're the self-hating cis.
They are the self-hating cis. I have a show to recommend to you.
I'm telling him cis please all the time.
Yeah. Yeah, but actually it was interesting because when we were hosting like events for AwesomeCon this year, we actually got like straight people posting on the Facebook pages being like, am I allowed to go to this? Is it okay? Like, I don't want to take up space. And it's like, oh, that's very sweet, but you can come. But that's
so woke.
Yeah, right? It was
which I hate. I hate that word, by the way.
Yeah. But that was just another thing. I hadn't seen that before. Now it's like, it's just an interesting little, quirk.
Yeah, so you can come to our stuff. It's just, not going to be about all your weird straight stuff.
Right.
Yeah.
It's like,
don't make a ruckus. Yeah. Don't speak too loud. No, I'm just kidding.
Just don't shove it down our throats. We can coexist, like that bumper sticker says.
Right.
Not everybody has cars.
I do
have a car.
It took me a second. All right. Well, why don't you guys give us the rundown? Where can we find you? What are you up to? I know you talked about FlameCon. Plug all of the things.
Okay, cool. Plugging time. So if you go on the internet, you can go to geeksout.org for the overall website, and that's where you can find out what all the events are going on in all the cities. There's also a blog and a podcast where people are reviewing all the fun media from a queer perspective all the time. Let's see. If you go to flamecon.org, you can find out about FlameCon, which is going to be held August 18th and 19th at the Sheraton in Times Square in New York City. So everyone is welcome. You should be there. There's also after parties. And then I think the other easy place to get us is if you go to Facebook or Twitter or Instagram or any of the social medias. We're just at Geeks Out. And there's like discussion boards on Facebook for different cities. People are always tweeting out fun stuff and finding creators that are cool.
Things we're reading.
Yeah. Oh yeah, that was one thing we talked about beforehand is in case there's any folks looking for queer comics that are kind of from a more atheist perspective or touching on interesting things about religion and faith and kind of getting away from that. There's 2 comic books that are self-contained graphic novels that we thought y'all might get a kick out of.
Yes, please.
Okay, so one is called Bingo Love. It's written by T. Franklin, and the art's by Jen St-Onge and Joy San. It's from Image Comics. But Bingo Love is about these 2 Black women who were in high school, and they realize they're attracted to each other, and they meet at church. And then at bingo playing, at the church playing with their grandparents. And it's about them, their families being, religiously not liking that, and then they break apart. But then 60 years later, they meet each other again, and it's about their reconnection, and it's super great.
Very cool.
You will cry. But the other one, if you like more of a sci-fi side of things, there's one called God Shaper from Boom Studios, which is written by Simon Spurrier and art by Jonas Goonface, which is the coolest name I've ever heard.
Right.
It's set in this like alternate version of today where like in the 50s, like all of the electricity and technology just stopped working and people started getting their own little gods that follow them around, kind of like Pokemon almost. And they're used for currency and all these things. And then there's some people who don't have gods, and they're kind of hated by society, but they can reshape other people's gods and make them money. So there's this kind of love-hate relationship between them and the people in power. And it's kind of about that revolution, but it's also very, very queer and super cool. So check them out.
Awesome. Well, I will have links to all of those things in the show notes for anyone who is interested. Tom and Ben, thank you so much for coming on the show. I love what you all are doing, and I really, really hope that we get to hook up and hang out at cons in the future.
Oh my God, anytime. Thanks for putting up with us.
We did it!
It's over.
And that, my friends, is going to do it for this episode of the Gay Atheist Manifesto. If you think what we do here is important, please share this around to your friends. Search the Gay Atheist Manifesto on Facebook and Twitter to find us there. I'm at Gaytheist Callie on Twitter, and you can email us at podcast@thegaytheistmanifesto.com. And does Ari have a thing?
Hey, Macarena, quit playing games with my heart. Friend me on Facebook, because I want it that way. Look at my photographs. If you don't have Facebook, don't go chasing waterfalls. Just stick to the rivers and lakes that you're used to. Send an email to aristillman4@gmail.com, and you know who will receive it? It's going to be May, with arms wide open. Oops, they did it again. The cysts are getting out of hand, so Marissa and I still have to keep doing that podcast every week. Don't speak. I know just what you're thinking. You know I'd walk 1,000 miles to release another episode of the SJW Circle Jerk. But it's actually 1,328 miles away, so that's a bit out of my way. Oh, and one final thing, because I've gotten some questions about this. If you want to be my lover, you got to get with my friends. Because I'm poly. But until next week, bye, bye, bye.
If you want to support the show and the activism we do, you can head to patreon.com/thegaytheistmanifesto and make a per episode donation as little as $1 per episode. And if you can't do that, you can still give us a 5-star rating on Apple Podcasts, share us around to your friends. It all helps and it all makes a difference. Before we go, I want you to know that if you're lost, you're hurting, you're scared, if you feel like no one cares and no one understands, you need to know there's a community out here that loves you, cares for you, knows that you're capable of amazing things and that you are worthy of love. If you're struggling, please don't be afraid to reach out. Until next time, friends, this is the Gay Atheist Manifesto.